Aimee Elizabeth Semple Mcpherson, also known as Sister Aimee or Sister, was a Canadian Pentecostal evangelist and media celebrity in the 1920s and 1930s, famous for founding the Foursquare Church. Mcpherson pioneered the use of modern media and religious services, using radio to draw on the growing appeal of popular entertainment, and incorporating stage techniques into her weekly sermons at Angelus Temple, an early megachurch. In her time she was the most publicized Protestant evangelist, surpassing Billy Sunday and other predecessors. She conducted public faith healing demonstrations involving tens of thousands of participants. Mcpherson's view of the United States as a nation founded and sustained by divine inspiration influenced later pastors. National news coverage focused on events surrounding her family and church members, including accusations she fabricated her reported kidnapping. Mcpherson's preaching style, extensive charity work and ecumenical contributions were a major influence on 20th-century charismatic Christianity. Mcpherson was born Aimee Elizabeth Kennedy in Salford, Ontario, Canada, to James Morgan and Mildred Anna Pierce Kennedy, 1871–1947. She had early exposure to religion through her mother, Mildred, who worked with the poor in Salvation Army soup kitchens. As a child she would play Salvation Army with classmates and preach sermons to dolls. As a teenager, Mcpherson strayed from her mother's teachings by reading novels and attending movies and dances, activities disapproved of by the Salvation Army and her father's Methodist religion. In high school, she was taught the theory of evolution. She began to ask questions about faith and science, but was unsatisfied with the answers. She wrote to a Canadian newspaper, questioning the taxpayer-funded teaching of evolution. This was her first exposure to fame, as people nationwide responded to her letter, and the beginning of a lifelong anti-evolution crusade. While attending a revival meeting in 1907, Mcpherson met Robert James Semple, a Pentecostal missionary from Ireland. She dedicated her life to Jesus and converted to Pentecostalism. At the meeting, she became enraptured by Semple and his message. After a short courtship, they were married in an August 1908 Salvation Army ceremony. Semple supported them as a foundry worker and preached in the local Pentecostal mission. They studied the Bible together, then moved to Chicago and joined William Durham's Full Gospel Assembly. Durham instructed her in the practice of interpretation of tongues. After embarking on an evangelistic tour to China, both contracted malaria. Semple also contracted dysentery, of which he died in Hong Kong. Mcpherson recovered and gave birth to their daughter, Roberta Starr Semple. On board a ship returning to the United States, she held religious services and classes. After her recuperation in the United States, Mcpherson joined her mother Mildred working with the Salvation Army. While in New York City, she met accountant Harold Stewart Mcpherson. They were married in 1912, moved to Providence, Rhode Island, and had a son, Rolf Potter Kennedy Mcpherson, in 1913. During this time, Mcpherson felt as though she denied her calling to go preach. Struggling with emotional distress and obsessive-compulsive disorder, she would weep and pray. In 1914, she fell seriously ill with appendicitis. Mcpherson later stated that after a failed operation, she heard a voice asking her to go preach. After accepting the voice's challenge, she said, she was able to turn over in bed without pain. In 1915, her husband returned home and discovered that Mcpherson had left him and taken the children. A few weeks later, he received a note inviting him to join her in evangelistic work. Harold Mcpherson followed her to bring her home, but changed his mind after seeing her preaching, and joined her in evangelism, setting up tents for revival meetings and preaching. The couple sold their house and lived out of their gospel car. Harold Mcpherson, despite his initial enthusiasm, wanted a more stable and predictable life, and returned to Rhode Island. In 1918 he filed for separation, then petitioned for divorce, citing abandonment. The divorce was granted in 1921. Mcpherson remarried in 1931 to actor and musician David Hutton. After she fell and fractured her skull, she visited Europe to recover. While there, she was angered to learn Hutton was billing himself as Aimee's man in his cabaret singing act and was frequently photographed with scantily clad women. Hutton's personal scandals were damaging the reputation of the Foursquare Gospel Church and its leader. Mcpherson and Hutton separated in 1933 and divorced in 1934. Mcpherson later publicly repented of the marriage for both theological and personal reasons, and later rejected gospel singer Homer Rotthaver when he proposed a marriage in 1935. In 1916, Mcpherson embarked on a tour of the southern United States, and again in 1918 with Mildred Kennedy. Standing on the back seat of their convertible, Mcpherson preached sermons over a megaphone. In 1917, she started a magazine, Bridal Call, for which she wrote articles about women's roles in religion. She portrayed the link between Christians and Jesus as a marriage bond. Along with taking women's roles seriously, the magazine contributed to transforming Pentecostalism into an ongoing American religious presence. If you enjoyed this episode, join me in my next episode as I continue. Subscribe, like and share with friends and family to promote the channel. Thanks.